G'day folks, wanted to dive today a little bit deeper into the topic of consent and generative AI. Now, for those of you that are not aware, why should you be? A big chunk of about 6 to 8 years of my career was focused on action research in the broad, diverse and nuanced area of digital consent. A lot of the work that I did ended up becoming the sort of standards and CX guidelines for open banking in the UK, the consumer data right here in Australia. That's informed work that's happening in New Zealand, in the US, throughout Europe, etc. Right? And I wanted to recap really quickly before we get into the Gen AI stuff. So in a typical sort of digital interface, let's say a mobile interface, the spirit of consent tends to be fairly aligned across jurisdictions. We're talking about a free and voluntary action. We're talking about notions like no detriment for non-consent. So there are different sort of parameters here. Now, in something like the EU's GDPR, there are quite specific criteria as to what constitutes valid or lawful consent. Now, a lot of my work is focused on meaningful consent, and specifically what that means, right? Now, in a given sort of consent experience, right, assuming that consent isn't a precondition of the service offering, which means that the data processing is sort of ancillary, it's optional, there might be some other lawful basis relied upon for other data processing activities in the context of the relational dynamics, say person to organization. You know, I come into this process, there's, there's maybe some type of progress indicator that tells me where I am. There's all different design patterns that myself and our team and others have sort of taken on board, right? We use layering, we use all different types of techniques to enhance the capacity that people have to make actual decisions, right? Now, you wouldn't actually do this IRL because that would be preferential and potentially manipulative design based on color psychology, etc. Now, in this context, what we're hoping is that the information that's surfaced through a progressive disclosure process appropriately informs the individual such that they are able to make an informed decision about the spectrum of consequences that may arise from consenting or not consenting, right? And there's a bunch of stuff that makes that really challenging. Number one, we still don't know if we really have free will. Not going to get into the sort of philosophy of mind space today. Okay, so that's challenging enough in the old world, a few months ago, of digital consent. Challenging enough, right? But one of the really important preconditions of meaningful consent is understanding, right? And the bodies of research that I've conducted look to assess understanding in a variety of different ways. We can look at different sort of proxies through behavior. We can look at accuracy of recall and recognition, etc., etc. There's lots of things that we can do to enhance understanding. We can aim for grade 5 readability. We can diversify the form factor. We can create layers of content so that the process of information disclosure, this progressive process of information disclosure, effectively caters to different appetites for information density and, importantly, different learning styles, right? Some people are awesome at learning from really detailed long-form written content. Many folks, that just goes way over their head, right? Give them a 30-second video all day, every day, and it's gonna make a difference, right? But let's just get to the crux of it. If understanding is a precondition of meaningful consent, and if we are asking folks to consent to some type of generative AI model, product, service, however we want to frame it, and the developers themselves don't even have the capacity to explain what's going on, there's a lot of difficulties in the XAI space at the moment, obviously, then can consent even be a thing? I'm going to argue that probably not, right? Now that might be controversial because a lot of folks are talking about this, but we need to throw around the idea that this thing that we really care about, you know, that helps us self-determine in the digital world, might not be possible, right? And we've argued that for lots of different reasons. Even in the cookie sort of space, there was a bunch of literature that was published a few years ago that basically looked at the fact that if we actually gave people choices when it came to cookie consent, less than 0.4% of people would affirmatively choose, like give expressed consent for a variety of different data processing activities, right? So we've got some big issues in this space. Now, if you are interested in how can consent be meaningful for generative AI, let's talk.